Good morning guys, and welcome to this edition of Hikelopedia. Today I'm in Hsinchu, but in a moment we're going to be taking a trip to the frontier island of Jinmen. Now you may or may not have heard of Jinmen. If you haven't, then it's a fascinating place. It's a tiny little island that is administered by Taiwan, but it lies just a stone's throw off the coast of China. In the past, it was a focal point for China's decades-long efforts to annex Taiwan, but more about that later. However, nowadays it's more of a tourist island where people from China and Taiwan can visit to learn more about history and each other. Anyway, enough. Let me take you on a trip to Jinmen. To get to Jinmen, you need to take a plane from one of Taiwan's regional airports. The flight takes around an hour, although there are frequent short delays due to weather conditions, as Jinmen often experiences thick fog. After touching down, we walked over to the rental counter to get some scooters. Jinmen is a small island, just 150 square kilometers and home to around 125,000 people. Therefore, it's easy to go native and get around via scooter. Just don't take too much luggage. From the airport, it was a short ride into one of Jinmen's main settlements, Jincheng, and lunch. Jinmen runs traditional Asian opening times, in which shops shut down for a few hours in the afternoon for a siesta, before reopening later on. One of the few places that was open actually turned out to be a great choice, as we enjoyed some delicious beef noodles, where the meat is cooked by the steaming beef broth the server pours onto it. The broth is really tasty, right? Is it good?
Yeah.
Another great thing about this restaurant is that you can help yourself to the delicious selection of sides. They actually feed the cows on the mash from Gaoliang, so I guess the meat will have like a sorghum or Gaoliang flavour, maybe. After our tasty lunch, it was another short scooter ride to our accommodation, a delightful little homestay or minsu called Patio Moonlight. I'll give you a quick little tour of our minsu. To the lounge on the right. And then turn this way, and we've got a cool little patio. And then go through this door into the bathroom. This is the bathroom. And then you can come through another little doorway into the bedroom. There's one bed downstairs, and if you go up this little staircase, there is another bed with some crazy people sleeping in it. A really cool thing about this place is the doors. They're really old-fashioned wooden doors, so you have to align them before you close them, like that, and then the lock is like being in a castle. Look. There you go. So we won't be invaded during the night now. And that is our little minsu in Old Tor village. Pretty cool, huh? A short rest later, we embarked on our first sightseeing of the trip to the nearby Jiashan Tunnel. Alright, we're here at Jiashan Tunnel. Now this tunnel was built during the period when the ROC and the Communists were shelling each other, and so this tunnel was built as a place where they could store boats, believe it or not, away from the shelling and to save them from getting damaged. Now, I don't think you need to wear this helmet because nobody else is wearing one, but kind of bringing out my inner YMCA, so I'm wearing it. I don't care. This tunnel is so cool. After leaving the tunnels, we had just enough time for a stroll along one of Jinmen's many beautiful strips of sand, Old Tor Beach. We're here on Old Tor Beach, which is just like 5 minutes from where we're staying, and it's such a beautiful beach. It's so big and wide, and the sand is absolutely beautiful. Golden sand, check it out. It's a bit wet because the tide's only just gone out, but it's so fine. It's really nice. And if we walk about 10 minutes in that direction, there's a bit of a surprise which I'm really looking forward to checking out. But you can only see it when the tide is low. So this is the surprise I was talking about. If you've been to Jinmen before, you'll be well aware of it, but if you haven't, there is a Second World War era tank, an M18 Hellcat, I think it's Second World War, buried on the beach. I'm not sure how it ended up on the beach here. Still, it's a pretty interesting thing to see. Just buried right here in the sand, and it's still in reasonably good condition, still intact anyway. I started day 2 with an early morning solo wander around Old Tor, the ancient village where our Min Su was located. Alright guys, it's early morning. I'm having a walk around the village where our Min Su is located. It's called Old Tor, and it's named after the Ouyang clan who moved here from Quanzhou, just over the water, around 400 years ago in the middle of the Qing dynasty. And all the houses are built in a particular style, and it's a really beautiful little village. I'm going to have a walk around now and check out some of the old houses. This place is the Ouyang clan ancestral shrine. You can see on the sign above the door, but you can't look inside, unfortunately. Not all of the houses are in mint condition, but you know, a lot of them are, which is great. But from this one here, you get an idea of how these old houses were built, the roof beams and the supports and the tiles and things like that. Once everyone was up and had had breakfast, we headed to the northwest corner of the main island for a deep dive into what Jinmen is all about. Military history. Our first stop was at the super interesting Beishan Broadcasting Wall. After that, we headed to the Guningtou Battle Museum to learn about what happened back in 1949. We're here in the village of Guningtou, which, if you're familiar with Taiwan, you've probably heard of, but if you're not, then I'll give you a little bit of background. This is a little town on the northwest corner of Jinmen Island. It was the scene of a big battle that was pivotal in the survival of the Republic of China and Taiwan, and kind of ensured that they didn't become part of communist China following the Chinese Civil War. What happened was, in 1949, just after the ROC army had decamped en masse to Taiwan, they left quite a few soldiers in Jinmen here and in Matsu a bit further north, as a kind of like protecting force against the communist invasion. The Communist Army kind of figured that in order to take Taiwan, they would take Jinmen first. So I think it was October the 25th, 1949. They sent over about 10,000 troops out of an army they had of 20,000, because they thought that would be enough to take Jinmen. And things started off pretty well as they secured a beachhead and advanced towards Jincheng city, which is like one of the bigger towns on the island. But over the next day or so, the Nationalists brought reinforcements into the battle, and they were able to push the communist forces back to where they had landed. And then around 48 hours later, after some fierce battles, they managed to force the communists back onto the beaches and then destroy most of their army and their boats, and it ended up with around 900 communist soldiers surrendering, and several thousand had died. So after that they had to regroup and try and think of another way they could take Taiwan. But in the meantime, the Korean War started, and then the American president at the time, can't remember who it was, but he vowed to support the Chiang Kai-shek regime on Taiwan, and so that basically brought an end to hostilities and enabled the ROC on Taiwan to thrive as it has and turn into like present day Taiwan as it is now. So interesting historical take. Not everybody will agree with that, but that's what a lot of people believe. And some of the fiercest fighting, street to street battles, as the communists were pushed back towards their beachhead, took place here in Beigan. I think it's Lin Tso village as well, and you can see behind me now there's a bunch of pockmarks and bullet holes in this old Western style Chinese building. I just learned all this from the museum, which is like about 2 minutes down the road. But it's a pretty interesting place to come and learn a bit about the history of the Chinese Civil War. By now, day 2 was getting pretty hot, but luckily my wife stumbled upon a great little shaved ice store, and we managed to cool off with a delicious hawthorn berry and miancha flavoured shaved ice. From there we returned to the airport. We had decided to trade our scooters in for an electric car, as we thought it would be much easier for us to visit Little Jinmen later in the day. It was my first time driving an e-car, and it was definitely a fun experience, although the car itself, a Chinese BYD brand, seemed a little rough around the edges. After picking up the car, our first stop off was for lunch in the town of Jinhu, before we headed north to Shanhou Cultural Village. To be honest, there wasn't much to see here for us, as it was pretty much identical to the place where we were staying. But if you're in a hotel, then this place would obviously be a lot more interesting. With the kids flagging, we decided now was probably the best time to make the long drive over to Little Jinmen, or Liaoyu. And so we ventured over the recently opened 5-kilometer Jinmen Dachao. Google, you need to update your maps because the Jinmen Bridge doesn't exist. If we put in go to Xiamen from Da Jinmen, then you cannot go there on the car. So Google, update your maps. We stopped at a couple of locations in Little Jinmen. One where you can get a really good close-up of the Chinese city of Xiamen. This kind of reminds me of the coast on the back side of Pulau Ubin, with the fences there to try and keep out the people crossing illegally from Malaysia, but obviously this one has more historical and different kind of purpose. The other place was a small bakery, as we went in search of the famous Jinmen Xiaobing, or baked pastry. I'm going to try this Xiaobing. Jinmen is quite famous for Xiaobing, and we finally got one. It was the last one in the shop. It's a salty one, and it's got spring onions in as well. It's quite nice, but it's very dry. Tasty, but it's a lot of pastry. It makes my mouth feeling very dry now. I'm gonna have a drink. Driving around Jinmen, it's hard not to notice a couple of really unique things about the place. The first one is that unlike Taiwan, there are quite a few traffic islands on Jinmen, although the people there still don't seem to understand traffic island driving etiquette. Let the person on the island go around. Another surprising thing about Jinmen is that it has one thing in common with India. You may ask, what is that? Well, the fact there's just random cows all over the place, although it's not quite like India where they just walk wherever they want. Most of them here are tied up, although I have seen one or two just wandering around. It's kind of fun to see. Later on, we headed back to the Minsu to try some local specialties and have an early night after another exhausting day. When you come to Jinmen, there's one thing you've got to do, and that is drink高粱, this alcohol. It's what Jinmen is famous for, and I have to be honest, I'm not a big fan, but you come here, you've got to drink some. So I'm just going to have a shot now. What percentage is this one? Is this just 40%? This one is 58%. Here's to Taiwan, Jinmen, and good health. Ooh, fire water. It's quite smooth though. Jinmen wan sui, sui su bing. Let's try it. Ooh. It's very crumbly, and there's mochi inside on Kaoliang. Very good. The next and last day saw another early start, well, for me and my wife anyway, as we made the pilgrimage of Jinmen's tallest peak, Taishan. Day 3 brought us our first taste of Jinmen's famed fog, which meant we couldn't see much during our walk. In fact, we couldn't even find the summit. Apparently there is a much nicer trail directly to it that starts from the east side of the mountain, but we only found this out later. Then it was back down for breakfast and a quick solo whiz around the 823 Artillery Museum. History is my thing, as you probably already know. The 823 Artillery War, or the Second Taiwan Strait Crisis, began in August 1958 when China launched an all-out attack on Jinmen. After an initial naval attack was thwarted, the Communists began a relentless bombardment of the islands using heavy artillery. With the ROC struggling to resupply the islands due to the heavy bombardment, the US eventually stepped in and began escorting the ROC supply ships. Not wanting to start a war with the US, the PRC then backed off, and by December the crisis was largely over. Still, the shelling continued for the next 20 years thanks to a bizarre gentleman's agreement that saw the PRC shell Jinmen on odd-numbered days and the ROC return fire on even days. Often the shells would be filled with propaganda material rather than explosives. The shelling ended in 1978 when the US established diplomatic relations with Beijing. To learn more about this rather unique conflict, you can visit the museum. In my opinion, it's well worth it, and just one of the many fun and interesting activities you can enjoy while visiting this unique little place. And we're back in Hsinchu. I hope you enjoyed the highlights of our recent family trip to Jinmen, and if you haven't been there, I highly recommend that you go there for a short trip, as it's a really cool place and there's lots of stuff to see and do. If you enjoyed the video, then you know what to do. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you want to support the channel, click thanks down below or head on over to my Buy Me a Coffee. Alright, that's it guys. Take it easy and I'll see you next week. Over and out.